This is a Bergen Film Club podcast.
Like an old movie removed from the frame, I am floating and looking for someone to blame. Won't you project me on the walls of your heart? I'm waiting for the real thing to start.
Hello, and welcome to The Real Thing. I'm your host, Joe Lawrence, and here we are on episode 5. How exciting. We've made it all this way to 5. 5 is a good number. I'm excited to make it to 10, 15, 20, 25. I think it's going good. I'm having a great time. This podcast is an extension of Bergen Film Club, which is an independent cinema in the heart of Bergen, Norway. The goal of the film club is to show films in order to give a voice to those who need it and give insights into cultures that are unknown, but also show very, very good movies. In this podcast, I talk about the films that are included in the film club's past, present, and future catalogue of movies. And today, we are going into the past, actually. So far, we have done upcoming or just past films in the film club, but today we're taking it back all the way to 1993, which is where it all started, to talk about Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas, which I'm very excited about. I love that movie so much, and I'm very excited to be doing a musical. I didn't think that we would be doing musicals so soon on the podcast, but I'm very glad that we have reached this destination so soon. Once again, it is just me on the podcast, no guests this time, but I think it worked out pretty well last time, so I think it's going to be good. This episode might be a little shorter than usual as well, but don't worry, gonna keep this amazing momentum going, the amazing coverage of the films going, so don't worry about that. We still have a great episode. We're going to be bringing in that Halloween, Christmassy feeling 9 months early, because why not, you know? This is a very special episode of the podcast, actually. Not only is it our 5th episode, but this is the first on-location episode of the podcast. I'm supposed to be traveling back to England. I was supposed to be there today to see my family, but God had different plans for me, as he often does. God said, no, today you are staying in the Skondik Hotel right next to Bergen Airport. And that's fine. We've got a very lovely hotel room. I just had a really bad meal, and I'm ready to do some podcasting. When I say that it has been a long day, I really mean that it has been a long, long day. But you know, you got to take it as it comes, roll with the punches, otherwise life will break you. And that's my message for today, that life will break you if you don't let it wash over you. And that's the energy that I'm taking into this episode of the podcast. So I hope that you're all here for it. Apart from that, it's been a freezy cold week in Bergen, upwards of -10. Who could believe it? But it's been very sunny, and it's been nice to see some sun. I think it was also sunny last week, and it's nice to keep up that vitamin D hit. As this podcast will kill you told me. Here I'm repeating myself really, but I'm thinking about vitamin D a lot now, and I think you should too. Go outside, look at the sky, get that circadian rhythm fixed, and let's start the episode. Let's get into it with some recommendations. So in terms of podcast recommendations, I'm recommending The Last Podcast on the Left from the Last Podcast Network. This podcast covers all of the horrors our world has to offer, both imagined and real, from demons and slashers to cults and serial killers. It's guaranteed to satisfy your bloodlust. I have started listening to this podcast, and it is wildly liked. It is one of the most popular and successful podcasts that is out there. I believe that it started all the way back in 2015, and it's just three guys just being dudes talking about, yeah, like what I just said, serial killers, Satan, horror, everything that I really love in a perfect little 45-minute episode. It's really good. I would say maybe there needs to be a bit of a trigger warning for some of the earlier episodes. I would say that those three men are not particularly as PC or as updated as we are in 2023, but it's still good and it's very funny. And they talk about some interesting stuff. I've been learning about drug cartels in Mexico, but you're not allowed to talk about it. I learned about the origins of Satan or the image of Satan, Hieronymus Bosch. It's been great. So I'm really enjoying the podcast at the moment. And for those of you like me who just listen to podcasts endlessly, like I said, the catalog starts in 2015, so there is a lot of episodes to get through. So it's got a huge catalog, and I'm excited to keep going with it. And yeah, it's very good. So for TV recommendation, I'm back on Netflix. I'm back on my TV train. I started watching this a little while ago, and I just recently started watching it again. But it's Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities, which is on Netflix. It's 8 episodes. And each episode is a different thing, and it's just like a very cool Guillermo del Toro-y story. With a really great cast. Each episode, it's really good. Obviously, it's produced by him, and he has sort of like a spotlight on each director, and it's fun. It's like kind of the Twilight Zone kind of vibe. But it has some really great episodes. So far, I watched an episode of like an alien inhabiting a cadaver and trying to take over the human race. But I think my favorite episode so far has been episode 4, which is called The Outside, which is about this character called Stacy who begins to use this like lotion that she has like a terrible allergic reaction to, and kind of like to the dismay of her husband who thinks that she's perfect just as she is. She's convinced that this lotion is gonna make her have this huge transformation and become beautiful just like her work colleagues. And it's really messed up and it's twisted and it's really great, really amazing practical effects. It's just very cool. So yeah, I'm going with that. It's Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities on Netflix. And lastly, for our film recommendation, I just rewatched Everything Everywhere All at Once with my friends Christian and Sophia. My God, that movie is so amazing. I don't even know how to sell it. It's one of the best movies there is for me. It is so, it's funny, it's sad, it's heartfelt, it's emotional, and you just can. I think it's really easy to connect to it because it's such a human, real story, even though it's with this like multiverse hyperbole situation. I just think you find yourself in any of those characters. They're so deep and so heartfelt. It's just, I don't even know. I don't know. I don't know what to say about it that hasn't already been said before. It has won literally every award that it has been nominated for, and awards on everything. But I think that it is a pretty good indication that this is an amazing movie because it genuinely is. It also uses a lot of practical effects, which we love on the podcast. And yeah, Michelle Yeoh's performance in this is just unparalleled. I think it's so complex and amazing, and all of the stunts that she does are just incredible. Ki Hui Kwan is fantastic, playing the role of her husband. He has such a depth to that performance, which is just so. It just makes me cry and cry and cry. It's so amazing. Jamie Lee Curtis is so good in it, and Stephanie Hsu. I just. What more can I say about this film? It is amazing. Go check it out. This message is also directly to my mum and my sister who have not watched the film and continue not to watch it. So, yeah, that's the film recommendation and also a little dig at my mum and my sister. But yeah, those are been the recommendations of this episode. It's a pretty good stuff. I'm really enjoying Last Podcast on the Left. It's very entertaining just listening to these dudes chatting, and yeah, Everything Everywhere All at Once. I don't think I'm gonna get tired of watching that film. It's incredible. But now let's get to the matter at hand. This episode we are talking all about the 1993 Henry Selick directed film The Nightmare Before Christmas. So yeah, today we're talking about The Nightmare Before Christmas, which is also known as Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas. It is a 1993 American stop-motion musical fantasy film produced and conceived by Tim Burton but directed by Henry Selick. Now this is a little bit of drama that we're going to get into a little bit later. See, I'm teasing for something that's coming. It's some interesting drama for sure. Initially, it was released through Touchstone Pictures because Disney thought that the film was too dark and scary for kids. But feature films released under under the Touchstone label, were produced and financed by Disney still, and featured more mature themes targeted towards adult audiences. So stuff that is atypical of what Walt Disney Pictures tries to be. And as such, Touchstone was merely a brand of Disney and did not exist as a real distinct business operation. Touchstone operated as an active film production division of Disney during the 1980s and through the early 2010s, releasing the majority of the studio's PG-13 and R-rated films, but eventually was made defunct in 2017. So it was basically a way of Disney to protect their sweet, innocent Mickey Mouse brand. It was met with critical success, praised for its animation, characters, songs, and the score. It was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects, which is pretty exciting for an animated film. So it was the first animated film, in fact, to be nominated for this category. But it lost to Jurassic Park, which we talked about on the second episode of the podcast, which was the work done by Phil Tippett, who made Mad God. It was a modest box office hit at first, but since then it's got an enormous cult following, me included. $50 million US in the US on its initial theatrical run, but later it made way more when now the value sits something at like $91.5 million US, whereas the budget was 24 million, I think. So it made bank. It's regarded as a moderate sleeper hit, and our research has included a quite fun definition of what a sleeper hit is. It's generally considered to be a film, series, music, video game, or some other entertainment product that was initially unsuccessful on release, but became successful later on. A sleeper hit may have had little promotion or a lack of successful launch, but gradually develops a fan following that garners media attention, which in turn increases its public exposure and public interest in the product, which is what happened with this film. That it wasn't so big when it came out, but since then I believe that it's had re-releases and several kind of like DVD, Blu-ray, etc. releases as well. So it's definitely maintained and propelled its way through the zeitgeist, I guess. The plot tells the story of Jack Skellington, who is the king of Halloween Town. He stumbles onto Christmas Town and schemes to take over the holiday. Halloween Town is a fantasy world populated by various monsters and beings associated with the Halloween holiday. Jack Skellington, highly respected by the other citizens, he is regarded as the Pumpkin King and is the one who leads the annual organization and planning of the festivities. However, this year Jack has grown tired of the same old repetitive celebrations each year, and he craves change. And one day, whilst wandering in the woods, he stumbles upon 7 trees that contain the doors to each holiday: Halloween, Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, Valentine's Day, St. Patrick's Day, and Independence Day. So it's obviously it's a very American viewpoint. And on this new discovery of Christmas, he's delighted and fascinated, and he's ecstatic to share his findings. And he's determined to make Christmas Halloween Town's new venture. It's a new way to bring him joy, and it kind of just goes from there. It's just so good. It's fantastic, and we'll talk about it in a sec. But the music in this film is incredible. It's made by Danny Elfman, who's just like a paragon of score making people, whatever that word is, and it's just great. Many great characters, a great voice cast. We have Chris Sarandon as Jack, and with Danny Elfman providing the singing voice for Jack Skellington, and Sally, who's sort of Jack's friend and love interest in the film, is voiced by Catherine O'Hara from Beetlejuice, from Home Alone, Schitt's Creek. She provides such a good performance in this film. So this film had a very interesting production story. Tim Burton wrote a 3-page poem, The Nightmare Before Christmas, in 1982, and basically this was the origin of the film. He wanted to make it into a short film or a half-hour TV special. However, it wasn't until years later, in 1990, that he made a development deal with Disney Studios that the movie would really start becoming a reality, and then production started in 1991. So one of the few friendships that Burton had made at Disney was with Henry Selick, who had carved out a niche for himself after leaving Disney with his stop-motion animation for MTV and some other short films. So this is how Henry Selick became involved. Henry is an American film director, producer, screenwriter, production designer, and animator who is best known for directing stop-motion animation films. And this film was his directorial debut, which is an incredible film to begin with. Other films in his filmography would be James and the Giant Peach, which is another fantastic film, another fantastic stop motion film. It has Joanna Lumley and Jennifer Saunders, and a great cast. And yeah, that's so fantastic. Coraline. He also directed Coraline, which is an incredible film. So just like genre defining in terms of the stop motion films. And more recently, in 2022, he worked on Wendell and Wild with Netflix. So I have known about Henry Selick because Coraline is one of my favorite movies, and James and the Giant Peach is a film that absolutely terrified me as a child, but I still loved it. And he, from what our researchers, Mamina and Ingrid, provided, I think I like this guy even more. He seems like a really cool guy. When he was talking about working with stop motion, he said, quote, "There's something about real objects being hand manipulated and brought to life that is always going to bring me back. It's the oldest type of animation, and I think it has the strongest magic." End quote. That magic, he explains, is linked directly to the craft of stop motion and how it manifests on screen. Quote, "If you make stop motion so perfect that it looks like computer animation, what's the point? Just make computer animation." End quote. So he's just so like fantastic, and I think he is a great director, and definitely kind of to stick with stop motion for so long and really like fight in its corner is such an admirable thing, because I really think it's such an amazing art form. Selick achieved a huge credit for working with Coraline and now with his new Wendell and Wild movie that's on Netflix. Both films feature Selick in the director's chair and were marketed as such. So he says that Coraline is based on a really good book by Neil Gaiman, so that was a good way to sort of promote that. And on Wendell and Wild, his collaborator was Jordan Peele, so that was one of the reasons why that film was able to be so successful. But he said that truly he really likes to collaborate, which is one of the things that he always likes to be leading the team, but being collaborative and acknowledging other people's work is what he strives to be as a leader, which I think is great. He sounds like such a cool guy. But as we know, stop motion is a time-consuming process that requires animators to move characters or puppets one frame at a time, and this is very intense work. It takes several days to do what might take a couple seconds on film. 14 of the top stop motion animators in the world work simultaneously on all of the sets, managed to complete about 70 seconds of film a week, which is crazy. They said that the Jack Skellington puppet had 400 different heads that are replaced each time he changes expression, but the kind of hidden villain of this film, who is called Oogie Boogie, his innards, he is made up of bugs, but they animated each individual bug, which was like 3,000 different mechanical bug puppets, which is insane, but it's what the director says, that it is a really incredible art form, and there's no point trying to make it look like real life. Stop motion looks a certain way and feels a certain way, but it has a certain magic in there, and that working towards that is It's just fantastic, really. I love this film. It captures the creepy movements of all the characters so perfectly, and really the way that each kind of Halloween puppet is animated makes you have this sort of like creepy feeling, I suppose, which is then contrasted with those who live in the Christmas world, who are kind of these like much larger, more slower moving puppets. So it's just such a great storytelling device as well as a way to make films. Stop motion is great. So as I mentioned, this is a musical and it has some absolutely fantastic musical numbers. This is Halloween is a great tune. Sally's song, What's This? What's This? Is also amazing. And it's all thanks to the legendary Danny Elfman, who scores and writes the songs for this movie. And like I said, he's also providing the singing voice for the main character Jack. And Elfman voiced all the parts as he wrote the music, and in the process became so fond of Jack Skellington that he remains his singing voice, basically. So it was more that Danny Elfman just decided that he was going to do this. Elfman has made music for many of Tim Burton's films: Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Beetlejuice, Batman, Edward Scissorhands, Batman Returns. When talking about the first song, he said, quote, "The truth is we blindly started making the film with What's This? That means that the songs were cornerstones to build the film around, and then the screenwriter Caroline Thompson was brought in to fill the pieces of story between the songs." End quote. And Selick says, one good thing is that when you're given a song to animate and bring to life, there's a lot of storytelling already worked out. There was already a story task to accomplish. So getting a song was like being given a running time and a rhythm, and it gave a solid framework to build the sequence to. And that he ended up really enjoying that. And that sometimes it was harder to storyboard and sketch a scene with a non-musical part. So in effect, with the songs, there was limitations in terms of timing and which characters you would go to, which I think is such a fun way to sort of frame the making of a film. We talked about this when we talked about Your Name in the first episode of the podcast, in which that the storyboarding and the score were made at the same time, so they were sort of influencing each other. The way that the characters were moving could be influenced by the music, and also then in the way that certain scenes played out, this score could be directly influenced. And that creates like this wonderful tightness between score, songs, and performance, which gives the film such a magic cohesiveness, which just adds to the wonder and the absolute dreaminess of this film. Danny Elfman has frequently worked with a lot of the same directors, so Tim Burton, Sam Raimi, and Gus Van Sant. He has 4 Oscar nominations, 2 Emmys, and a Grammy. In 2013, Danny Elfman returned to the stage for the first time since his own band, Oingo Boingo, had disbanded, to sing a handful of the Nightmare Before Christmas songs as part of the concert Danny Elfman's music from the films of Tim Burton, featuring suites of music from the 15 Tim Burton films arranged by Elfman. But the concert since then has toured internationally, and since 2015, Elfman has appeared regularly at the Hollywood Bowl Halloween concert featuring full orchestra performance of the Night Before Christmas score live to the film production, which is awesome. In 2021, he had Billie Eilish come and voice Sally and sing her parts, and in 2022, last year, we had Phoebe Bridgers, which had the lesbians gagged, and me too. It was great. So as I mentioned, there was some drama with this film, which I wasn't really aware of until our researchers, Mamina and Ingrid, brought it to my attention. So Tim Burton is a director that really needs no introduction, but here goes anyway. He made his directorial debut with the 5-minute Disney puppet animated film Vincent, about a 7-year-old boy who dreams of being Vincent Price. And since then, he's gone on to make just countless amazing films. He made one of, I think, my favorite film of all time, which is Big Fish. I love that film so much, and it's so, like, it has this, like, very twisted Tim Burton element, but it's also incredible heartfelt storytelling, which is really something that you find in a lot of his films, that there is this sort of, like, creepy element, but at the heart of it, it is very human. So that, like Big Fish, like Beetlejuice, like Edward Scissorhands, which I think is such a tragic, beautiful film. I love it. But like I said, there was some drama. And it was essentially down to maybe Tim Burton getting a little bit too much credit for this film. So this film wasn't always called Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas. Henry Selick in fact said that it wasn't called this until 3 weeks before the film came out. He said that he would have been fine with this if it is what he had signed up for. Selick directed the movie along with Caroline Thompson, who did the script that was based on Burton's character and story and this poem that he wrote. But essentially, Walt Disney Studios, through their label Touchstone Pictures, wanted to take advantage of Burton's star power. He was just coming off 2 wildly successful Batman movies as well as Edward Scissorhands, and his name surely would have helped the initial marketing push. But as Selick pointed out, when it came to actually making the film, Burton wasn't even on set. Quote, Tim was in LA making 2 feature films while I was directing the film. And I mean, Tim is a genius. Or he certainly was in most of his creative years. Funny. I also thought this story was perfect, and he designed the main characters, but it was really me and my team of people who brought this to life. End quote. And according to Selick, there's yet another collaborator who tends to take full credit. Quote, now, of course, if you ask Danny Elfman, well, that's his movie. The Nightmare Before Christmas is Danny Elfman's movie. When we finished the film, it was so funny because he came up to me and shook my hand and said, Henry, you've done a wonderful job illustrating my songs. And he was serious, and I loved it. So it seems that Disney sort of slapped Tim Burton's name on this film when maybe he wasn't as involved as you would think. And even 25 years after it was first released, people consider it to be an official part of Burton's impressive filmography as a director, with Selick's significant work often forgotten. Selick says, quote, I don't want to take it away from Tim, but he was not even in San Francisco when we made it. He came up maybe 5 times over 2 years and spent no more than 8 to 10 days in total. We did communicate while he was filming in Los Angeles, and he offered suggestions. It's more like he wrote a children's book and gave it to us, and we went from there. But the bottom line was that Tim Burton's name before the title was going to bring in more people than it would mine, end quote. Which I think is a shame, really, because Henry Selick is an incredible director, he's an incredible artist, and that Disney is so concerned with pushing their own envelope from a financial point of view, which, I mean, ultimately makes sense. What does a company want to do? It wants to make money. So, but it's a shame. But some of this could be due to Burton's contract. Disney offered Burton a contractual promise of creative autonomy, but insisted that the film be titled Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas to capitalize on his name recognition, as well as distance it from a standard Disney film, since it was released through this Touchstone Pictures. While a small handful of other filmmakers, including Fellini and Ken Russell, had their names tied to the film, Burton was the first and only filmmaker to have his name incorporated into the title of a film that he did not make himself. He did not write the script, he did not direct the film, although, like I said, he was involved in the conception. So, credit where credit's due, this film wouldn't exist without Tim Burton's mind, but ultimately it was Henry Selick and Caroline Thompson who drove this film to be what it was, and Danny Elfman for writing the music. And I think that, you know, in 2023, where they're like, what, 30 years later now, it's time to give Henry Selick some recognition, because he's an incredible worker, as well with Caroline Thompson. Not that Danny Elfman needs any more recognition, but I think that's a shame, and I suppose it's a larger issue with Hollywood in general, that creative licensing is often forgone in place of financial success, and especially with Disney. But this episode I've already mentioned Mexican drug cartels, and I've been very mean about Disney, so I think that I'm on a high hit list, so I think it's time to pivot and look at some more descriptions of the film from Selick himself. Selick quite nicely put, or when he was reflecting on the direction of the film, it's as though Burton laid an egg and I sat on it and hatched it. He wasn't involved in a hands-on way, but his hands are in it. That it was Henry's job to make it look like a Tim Burton film, which is not really so different from his own films. When Tim Burton was talking about the film, he mentioned that he had been a lonely child growing up, which makes sense, and that holidays were a time of escape and wonder for him. That any time it was Christmas or Halloween, that he'd go to thrifties and buy stuff, and it was great. It gives you some sort of texture all of a sudden that wasn't there before. He finds that the mix of Halloween and Christmas is beautiful, and that he just liked the idea of this sort of reverse Grinch character. Jack is not a bad character, he says, referring to the influence of Dr. Seuss's The Grinch Who Stole Christmas, that he liked the kind of character that's passionate but doesn't really know what he's doing or what he's doing wrong. That he thinks that it's the reaction against this kind of society that you grow up in, where people don't feel a lot or go out on a limb a lot and just kind of remain in the shadow and judge other people. What's nice about these characters is that they just get swept along in something even if they don't know what they're doing. Basically following a story of characters that have the best intentions but are ultimately seriously misguided. In the same vein, when the film was sort of critiqued being too scary for young children, Burton said that he had a real issue about that. That maybe he was different growing up, maybe he was different from the other kids, but he doesn't think. He said that he was different from other kids in the sense that he was never scared of monster movies. That people forget that kids are intelligent. The other thing is that The Nightmare Before Christmas isn't really scary, and thematically, this story is about perception. These characters are not bad at heart, they just have a certain way, and things shouldn't be judged by the way that they look. And that's something that he has resisted his entire life. He's always pushing the envelope, so to speak, in terms of things that seems like you could judge, but when you really get to know the heart of someone, you can look past their kind of scary exterior, which I suppose he plays into by the way that he dresses, but I think is really highlighted in his film Edward Scissorhands. This very like gaunt, kind of ostensibly scary character with these huge knives for hands, but really has a heart of gold. So yeah, I guess that's all that I really have to say about that film. It is probably one of my favorite films, one of my favorite musicals. It's so fantastic, and I doubt that anyone listening hasn't seen it. But why just watch it once a year? Go watch it right now on DisneyPlus.com. It's just a fantastic, magical, wonderful film. I've been watching it since I was really young. I would shout out to my mom for letting me watch it when I was a kid, because it's sad to hear that people would have been limited from watching it on the pretense that it's a scary film, but really it's a wonderful film where you get to learn about all these like fantastic characters and learn about their viewpoints, and it's just great, and the music is amazing. It really uh drove my love for musicals, I think, along with all the other musicals that I was watching as a child, but it's just fantastic. And additionally, go shout out Henry Selick if you're listening, huge fan. um, he deserves the credit for this film because he really did such a magical job. He really took what was a really incredible concept and made something amazing. So yeah, and Caroline Thompson, shout out as well for making an incredible script. And yeah, let's end the podcast with some 5-star letterboxd reviews, and we also have some low star reviews too. So to begin, we have Level Agento. If I had watched this film at a young age, I would have been scarred for life and probably would have needed therapy. But after I watched this now for the first time, I can say that the aesthetics are purely wonderful. The design of the characters is so creatively done. I always said that you could have watched it as a child and you wouldn't have been scarred for life. It's incredible. Asphyx, 5-star review. Emotional support movie, plus I get to sim for a dead, skinny, long boy. If I'm simping for anyone in that film, it's Sally. From Jolie Weinberg, I think I've consumed this movie more than I have other vegetables. And from Meg, no, but you don't understand that this is Halloween, pumpkins scream in the dead of night. This is Halloween, everybody make a scream, trick or treat till the neighbors die of fright. And for the half-star reviews, which I was surprised to see they exist. After watching this movie, I wish I could take off and then sew back the various parts of my body like Sally does. So that was from 365 Letters. And from Emil Watches Scars, this movie is ass and I hate how whiny they all are. I think you're ass and I hate how whiny you are. But that has been another episode of The Real Thing. Next week, we are talking about a pretty interesting, kind of controversial film. So I'm just going to tease that. I'm excited to talk about it. It's UK related because I'm going to be in the UK. But thank you so much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. But this has been The Real Thing. Thank you very much for listening. Catch you next time. This has been a Bergen Film Club production. Our music is by Wise John. Check them out on Instagram at WISEJohnOfficial. Our logo is by Pia Sofia Brentersen. This episode was produced, mixed and engineered by Joel Lawrence. Our researchers are Inke Shilpkai-Bern and Mamina Nazmajid. Want to talk to us about films? Then please send us an email at podcast@bergenfilmclub.com. Follow the show on Instagram and Twitter at TheRealThingPod. Check us out on Letterboxd at BFK The Real Thing. Thank you and goodbye. Listen, follow, leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, or wherever it is that you get your podcasts.